A kingdom shrouded in secrets. A girl with nothing but dreams. Ilara roams the streets, unseen, unheard, until one glance changes everything. The prince sees her. The world whispers.
Nobles conspire. Danger lurks in every shadow.
A forbidden love ignites. Betrayal cuts deep. Justice hangs by a thread. Can a girl of the streets rise above the palace walls? When all pieces fall into place, will love conquer power, or will the kingdom destroy her first?
Night fell over Arvindale like a curtain of sorrow. Rain poured relentlessly, turning the dusty streets into rivers of mud. The grand towers of the royal castle pierced the storm-filled sky, their torches flickering in defiance of the wind. To the nobles, this was just another night, a world of silk, banquets, and music behind stone walls. But outside those walls, reality was cruel. On the steps of the abandoned chapel at the edge of the market square, a young woman sat silently beneath the rain. Wrapped in a torn cloak, hair soaked, hands trembling from the cold, she watched the distant castle as if it held the answers to a question only she could hear. Her name was Ilara. People passed by her without a glance, as though she were invisible, nothing more than part of the broken scenery of the poor district. To them, she was just another beggar, another forgotten life. Yet there was something in her eyes, something unbroken. She pressed her hand against a small object hidden beneath her ragged clothes. A silver pendant hung from a fraying cord around her neck, engraved with a crest so old that only scholars or nobles could recognize it. Ilara didn't know why, but she had carried it her whole life. It was her only link to a past she could not remember, and a future she refused to surrender. Thunder rolled across the sky. Ilara stood slowly, painfully, as though the weight of the world clung to her shoulders. Someday, she whispered to herself, I will see inside those walls. I will stand before the prince, and I will know the truth. She didn't know why she believed that. She didn't know how it could ever happen. But she felt it deep in her soul, like a promise written before she was born. Some dreams aren't meant to be explained. They are meant to be followed. And hers was just beginning. Dawn crawled into Arvindale beneath a veil of gray clouds, bringing no warmth with it. Smoke from the bakeries drifted through the alleys, carrying the scent of bread that only the wealthy could afford. In the lower district, hunger gnawed at the bones of those who called these streets home. Ilara moved quietly through the muddy paths, her steps steady despite exhaustion. She had slept little, yet her eyes remained vigilant, always searching for someone in need. At the edge of the square, a small boy huddled inside a broken wagon, shivering violently. His face was pale, lips blue. Ilara knelt beside him. Hey, she said softly, brushing his wet hair away from his face. Are you alone? The boy didn't answer. He just stared, frightened. Ilara slipped off her cloak, thin as it was, and wrapped it around him. You'll freeze like this, she said, forcing a small smile. Stay here. I'll find something warm. She dashed toward the center of the square, where an old merchant was sweeping the front of his closed shop. The man's eyes narrowed as she approached. Back again, beggar, he spat. I told you yesterday. I'm not asking for me, Ilara said quickly. There's a child over there who needs food. Please. No coin, no bread, he replied, turning his back. Ilara hesitated. She reached under her tunic and pulled out a small cloth bundle. Inside was the silver pendant. She stared at it for a long moment, then held it out to the merchant. This is all I have, she said. It should be enough. The merchant snatched it. His eyes widened as he studied the crest. Where did you get this? It doesn't matter, Ilara answered. The bread. Please. He gave her a long, suspicious stare, then handed her a loaf. Back in the alley, the boy devoured the bread with tears in his eyes. Ilara watched him, relieved, but a chill crept through her heart. The pendant was gone. Her only link to her past gone. But fate had no intention of letting go of her story. And neither did those who now knew she possessed something worth stealing. Arvindale was a kingdom divided, not by borders or armies, but by silence. The silence between the crowned and the forgotten, between marble halls and broken streets. And at the center of that silent war stood a throne, soon to be empty. High in the hills beyond the city gates rose Castle Eldrith, ancient seat of the royal bloodline. Once a symbol of strength and unity, it now cast a long shadow over the land. The banners of the kingdom still flew, But they did not dance. They hung, heavy and motionless, as if mourning something not yet dead. Inside the throne room, tension weighed thicker than incense smoke. The king, King Aldrich of House Thorn, had not appeared in public for weeks. Some said he was gravely ill. Others whispered that he had gone mad. The truth? Hidden like everything else in Arvindale. Council members gathered beneath looming stone columns, voices sharp and impatient. "The people grow restless," said Lord Hawthorne, his tone brittle with irritation. "If the king does not address the realm soon, we will face more than rumors. We will face rebellion. We must think of succession," another voice added. "The prince must take a bride before the moon of oaths. It is the law. And if he refuses again," sneered a third. The chamber doors opened with a heavy groan. Lord Varro, cold-eyed and dressed in black velvet, stepped forward. "Then refusal," he said, "shall be regarded as abdication." A hush fell over the hall. King Aldrich, pale and weakened, sat slumped on his throne, a king only in appearance. Every breath he drew seemed labored, every blink slow. Time had become his enemy. "Do not speak for my son," he rasped. "He will choose in his own time." "With respect, your majesty," Varro replied smoothly, "time is exactly what we no longer have." From the balcony above, servants exchanged worried glances. Some bowed their heads. Others whispered behind their hands. Beyond these walls, in the streets below, the people of Arvindale weren't talking about weddings or lineages. They spoke of hunger. They spoke of injustice. And though she didn't know it yet, Alara's path would soon collide with the fate of kings. The winds of change had already begun to blow, and they carried the scent of uprising. Far from the throne room and its poisonous politics, Prince Alastair stood alone in the royal training grounds, sword in hand. The morning fog still clung to the stone walls, and the world was quiet, except for the steady rhythm of steel striking wood. Again, harder each time. He fought not an enemy but frustration. The burden that had been placed on his shoulders since birth was now tightening like a noose around his neck. "You'll break that dummy before you break the council's patience," a voice called behind him. Alastair paused and wiped the sweat from his brow. Sir Cedric, captain of the Royal Guard and one of the few men he trusted, approached with a calm expression. "They can wait," Alastair muttered. "I needed time to think." "Thinking is good," Cedric said. "Avoiding? Less so." Alastair sheathed his sword. "They want me to choose a bride like I'm choosing a horse. It's insulting, both to them and to me." Cedric shrugged lightly. "A king must marry. I'm not king yet." "No," Cedric replied, his tone tightening. "But you will be, and soon. Your father cannot stop what's coming. Neither can you." Before Alastair could answer, a royal messenger strode forward and bowed stiffly. "Your Highness, the king requests your presence immediately." The scent of herbs and death filled the royal chambers as Alastair entered. King Aldrich sat by the window, wrapped in heavy furs, skin ashen. "Father," Alastair said softly. "You're avoiding council meetings again," the king replied without turning. "You cannot run from your responsibilities forever." "I'm not running," Alastair said. "I'm questioning. There's a difference. If I marry, it will be to someone I choose, not someone chosen to strengthen the council's power." The king coughed painfully. "You think marriage is about power? Marriage is nothing but power. You must secure the throne, or the kingdom will devour itself." Alastair clenched his jaw. "The kingdom is already broken. The people are starving. Children sleep on the streets. And all the council cares about is bloodlines." For the first time, Aldrich looked at his son, truly looked at him. "You have a good heart," he said quietly. "But a good heart can be a dangerous thing for a king." Alastair held his father's gaze. "Then perhaps it's exactly what this kingdom needs." The king closed his eyes, as if the weight of the world pressed down on him. "Time will decide that," he said. "But time is running out. Not all monsters hid in the dark corners of Arvindale. Some wore silk and jewels and smiled as they plotted the ruin of others." The grand ballroom of Castle Eldrith shimmered beneath chandeliers of carved crystal. A private gathering of nobles had assembled under the guise of advising the realm. In truth, it was a council of vultures circling a throne they believed soon to be vacant. At the center of them stood Lady Madeline Ravel, Countess of Cerulean, admired by many, feared by more. Her beauty was undeniable. Raven-black hair, emerald eyes, and a smile that could melt or murder depending on her intention. But it was her mind, sharp as a dagger bathed in poison, that made her dangerous. She raised a glass, addressing the circle of powerful lords gathered around her. "Gentlemen, let us not pretend. The king is dying. The succession must be secured, and swiftly. The people need stability. The army needs direction. The council needs control. Lord Varro nodded approvingly. And how do you suggest we secure this control, Countess? With grace, she replied, her voice smooth. And strategy. The prince is young, idealistic, and far too sentimental. He must be guided. Guided, Lord Hawthorne scoffed. He refuses to marry, refuses to listen, refuses to accept the reality of ruling. Maitland's smile widened. Then we shall give him a reason to listen. The room leaned in. I will marry him. A ripple moved through the chamber. Lord Varro arched an eyebrow. You assume he will choose you? He will have no choice, she said. I will become his most trusted confidant. Then his bride. And once I am queen, this council will have exactly what it needs, unquestionable influence over the throne. And if someone else catches his attention? Asked another lord. Maitland's expression turned to ice. Then I will remove her. A sinister silence settled over the room. She placed her glass down gently, her fingers tapping once against the polished table, a promise, not a gesture. The future of Arvindale, she said, belongs to those with the will to shape it. In that glittering hall of false civility, alliances were forged in shadows. A plan was born, and somewhere, far from chandeliers and silver, a young woman named Alara had already become a threat without knowing it. The market square bustled with the usual chaos. Merchants shouting over the clatter of carts, dogs barking, and children weaving through the legs of busy shoppers. Rain had soaked the cobblestones, making each step treacherous, but no one noticed the small boy darting toward the center of the square. Alara's eyes caught him instantly. His tiny frame barely cleared the slick stone, and a large carriage barreled down the narrow street, wheels splashing mud in every direction. No! She screamed, sprinting forward. Her boots slipped, her cloak flapping wildly as she dove in front of the child. The boy's small hands grabbed hers, and together they tumbled out of the carriage's path. Mud splattered across their clothes. Rain poured down their faces. A moment of relief. She had saved him. But the relief was short-lived. A shout pierced the air. Stop! That girl! Seize her! Alara looked up. Guards in polished armor surrounded her, faces cold and impassive. You endangered the royal carriage, one barked. I saved a child, Alara protested, voice shaking. I didn't, but her words fell on deaf ears. The crowd murmured, uncertain, watching as the guards forced her to her feet. Her arms were twisted behind her back, and the boy's terrified eyes followed every movement. You'll pay for this, the lead guard said. The prince's safety is paramount. Alara struggled. Please, I didn't harm anyone. A woman in the crowd sneered. She's just a beggar. What else would you expect? The guards ignored her. They marched Alara toward the city gates, the boy's cries following them. Each step through the mud seemed heavier than the last. Every passerby a silent witness. No one stepped forward to help. And yet, amidst the fear, a shadow lingered at the edge of the crowd, a tall figure cloaked watching. The prince. Alistair's heart tightened as he observed her from atop the carriage steps. She was barely more than a girl, soaked and trembling, yet she moved with courage no courtly etiquette could teach. The guards threw her into the castle's holding cells without ceremony. Rainwater dripped down her hair, mixing with tears, her cloak clinging to her like a second skin. Alone in the cold stone cell, Alara sank to the floor, the boy's frightened voice echoing in her mind. She clenched the pendant at her neck, its silver surface dull beneath the dim torchlight. This small act of kindness, the only thing she had done right that morning, had become a crime in the eyes of the kingdom. Outside, the wind carried her defiance through the castle walls. Inside, a silent observer had already taken note. The girl who dared to stand in front of the royal carriage would change everything. The clamor of the market dimmed as the carriage doors swung open. Rain streaked the polished wood, and Alistair stepped down, eyes fixed on the figure in the mud. Alara's small form, drenched and defiant, had caught his attention before the guards could drag her away entirely. What is happening here? His voice rang out calm, but edged with steel. The lead guard stiffened. Your Highness, this girl endangered the carriage. She saved a child. Alistair cut in sharply, his gaze never leaving Alara. And for that, you intend to throw her in a cell? The guards faltered, unsure how to respond to a prince who had always been cautious, deferential, obedient. This was different. His eyes, fierce and unwavering, made hesitation dangerous. She is not a threat, Alistair said, stepping closer to the young woman. Mud clung to her cloak, hair plastered to her cheeks, yet she lifted her chin with stubborn pride. Her eyes, wide, questioning, defiant, met his. I didn't mean to, Elara began, but he raised a hand to silence her. You did exactly what needed to be done, he said softly. You acted with courage when others would have fled. The lead guard's jaw tightened. Your Highness, protocol. Protocol ends where innocence begins. Alistair's voice carried across the square, and the murmurs of the gathered crowd followed him like ripples. Release her. Now! The guards exchanged glances, reluctantly obeying. Chains fell away with a metallic clink. Elara rubbed her wrists, disbelief mixing with relief. You are the prince, she whispered, her voice barely audible over the rain. I am, Alistair replied, a faint smile breaking through the sternness. And you are the girl who reminds me why justice matters. Her heart skipped. This was no noblewoman, no advisor. No one had ever spoken to her like that. The weight of the castle, of the crown, seemed to shift around him, as if bending toward her. Why? She asked simply, her voice trembling. Because someone has to see what others ignore, Alistair said. And you saw more than anyone else. For a heartbeat, the world shrank to just the two of them, a prince in his finery and a girl in rags, connected by something neither fully understood. Rain poured down, washing the streets, but neither noticed. Then, without warning, the carriage wheels rolled forward, signaling the prince's departure. Alistair lingered, eyes locked on hers. I'll remember your name, he said. Do not let the world tell you otherwise. And in that fleeting moment, the first spark, a silent promise was made. Elara watched him leave, chest tight, knowing her life had changed. Unseen by the world, unseen even by the court, a new story had begun. A story that would defy rules, expectations, and the weight of kingdoms. The stables smelled of hay, sweat, and horses, a scent far removed from the rain-soaked streets of Arvindale. Elara stepped inside, her boots still muddy, her cloak dripping. The heavy wooden doors creaked behind her as a stable hand gave a cautious glance, then returned to brushing down a chestnut mare. First day, he muttered without looking up. Elara nodded, adjusting the satchel at her side. It held nothing but her few possessions and the silver pendant, still warm against her chest. This was not a palace ballroom or a grand feast. It was work, honest, hard, and unforgiving work. But it was shelter. And for now it was enough. She ran her hands over the mane of a black stallion, feeling the heat beneath her fingers, the life pulsing strong and steady. Hello, boy, she whispered. The horse flicked its ears and snorted softly, as if answering. Other servants passed, some offering curious stares. Whispers followed her. The girl from the carriage, the beggar. She kept her head low, moving quickly, hand steady. Every chore, feeding, mucking stalls, carrying water, was done with precision, each movement a statement. She belonged here, at least for the moment. Time passed, the hours stretching, and the sun broke faintly through the clouds. The castle above glittered in the distance, banners flapping in a hesitant breeze. Inside the stables, life was simple yet harsh. Elara found rhythm in the labor, a rhythm she had never known on the streets. Her muscles ached, her hands were raw, but for the first time in years she felt purpose. A young stable boy approached her cautiously. I heard about what you did, he said, eyes wide. The prince saw you, didn't he? Elara's hands paused mid-sweep. She didn't answer immediately. Then, softly, yes. He did. The boy nodded, barely hiding his awe. People are talking. Some say you're brave, some say you're reckless. But, the prince, he noticed. Her heart thumped. She had not expected recognition, not here, not yet. Yet the thought of it sparked something she had long buried. Hope. As she worked, Elara's eyes wandered to the pendant under her tunic. Its silver surface gleamed faintly in the morning light. A small smile touched her lips. Perhaps this was more than survival. Perhaps it was the beginning of something more. And somewhere in the upper towers, unseen by her, a figure watched from a balcony. The prince, already curious, already drawn to the girl who moved among the horses with quiet courage. For the first time, Elara understood. The streets had taught her how to survive, but the castle would teach her how to live. And in that slow, deliberate learning, her transformation began. The first days in the stables were the hardest. Every step, every motion seemed to draw eyes and murmurs. The other servants whispered behind her back, eyes narrowing as she passed. You'll never belong here, one girl muttered, flicking straw from her apron as Elara bent to clean a trough. Elara kept her head low, hands steady. She had survived worse. The streets had honed her patience. I belong wherever I choose to stand, she said quietly, almost to herself. A guard entered, inspecting the stable. His boots clicked sharply on the stone floor. "The prince is pleased with your work?" he asked, but the tone was mocking, venom barely restrained. "Yes, sir," Ilara replied, bowing slightly, suppressing the urge to glare. The man scoffed. "I doubt he notices much. Don't think kindness alone will get you far here." He turned on his heel and left, the echo of his boots fading but his words lingering like poison. Later, during chores, a bucket slipped from Ilara's grip. Water splashed across the floor and her shoes. Laughter erupted, sharp, cruel. "Clumsy beggar," someone snickered. "How did the prince not notice she's a fool?" Ilara clenched her jaw, but did not strike back. Instead, she took a deep breath, bent down, and cleaned the mess without a word. Each movement deliberate, steady, showing she could endure without breaking. Even as whispers grew, she found small victories. A horse calmed under her touch when none else could manage it. She understood each creature's rhythm, their fear, their trust. And word spread. The girl in rags was more than her appearance. She was careful, clever, unyielding. That evening, as rain splashed against the stable windows, Ilara found a moment alone. She held the silver pendant in her palm, tracing the old crest with her fingers. It had guided her so far, and it whispered promises of strength, of destiny. "You are stronger than they think," she murmured, her voice soft but unwavering. "And I will not bend for them." The next day, a group of young servants attempted to humiliate her further, hiding her cleaning tools and mocking her efforts. Ilara, instead of retaliation, calmly retrieved her bucket, used a broom as support, and completed the chores faster than anyone expected. Their laughter faltered into shocked silence. Even the guard who had mocked her yesterday watched, eyebrows raised. The same prince who had noticed her first act of courage would soon hear of this. For the first time, Ilara understood something vital. Humiliation was temporary, but resolve could become a weapon. Each insult, each sneer, each whispered doubt fueled her, not broke her. By nightfall, the stables were quiet. Ilara leaned against the doorframe, exhaustion pulling at her bones. Yet in her eyes burned a quiet fire, one that would not be extinguished. She had stepped into the castle as a beggar, and while the halls whispered doubt, she had begun to forge a presence that no amount of mockery could erase. And somewhere, high in the castle towers, Alistair watched the stables from a distance, unaware that the girl he had seen saving a child was growing into someone who could challenge even the most hardened hearts in the court. The game of power had begun, but Ilara had found her first victory. Evening fell over Castle Eldrith, painting the stone walls in shades of amber and gold. The castle's grand halls were silent, save for the occasional footfall of servants returning to their quarters. Ilara moved through the shadows of the corridors, carrying a bucket of fresh water for the stables, unaware that eyes followed her every step. Alistair lingered at the top of a staircase, leaning casually against the carved railing. He watched her with a quiet intensity, not as a prince watching a subject, but as a man observing someone who had captured his curiosity and respect. "Late again," he called softly as she passed, making her startle. I was just finishing chores," she replied, bowing her head. Her voice was low, cautious. He stepped closer, stopping just short of the faint glow of torchlight. "You move as though the castle belongs to you," he said, a hint of a smile playing on his lips. "Confident, careful, strong." Ilara's heart skipped. No one had ever spoken to her like this, not with admiration, not without judgment. "I try to do what I can," she murmured. "You do more than try," he said, lowering his voice so only she could hear. "You act." For a moment they simply stood there, rain-damp hair clinging to her forehead, torchlight flickering across his features. The world around them seemed to shrink. No guards, no whispers, no courtly expectations. "You're the prince," Ilara said finally, voice trembling slightly. "You have to act for the kingdom. For everyone. Why notice me?" Alistair shook his head slowly. "Because you see things differently. You see what others ignore. And you make it hard not to care." She swallowed, unsure whether to be frightened or flattered. "I don't even know you," she said softly. "Perhaps," he replied, stepping closer, but not too close. "Perhaps that's why this matters. Because I want to know you. Really know you." A quiet breeze whispered through the corridor, and for a fleeting moment, it carried the scent of rain, earth, and faintly of hay from the stables. They shared a smile, small but genuine, an acknowledgement of understanding, of trust forming in silence. "You're brave," he said, almost to himself. "Not just with the boy in the street, but with everything. You hold yourself with a dignity the world refuses to give you." Ilara's eyes met his, unafraid now. "And you notice that?" "I notice everything that matters," he said, a weight in his tone that belied the casual words. "And what matters is what you do when no one is watching." For a long moment the corridor held only the two of them, a prince and a girl who had saved a child, who had endured ridicule, who had refused to bow to fear. Words had formed a fragile bridge between them, a bridge neither expected, but both were already crossing. Finally, Alistair stepped back, offering a small nod. "Tomorrow," he said quietly, "I'll come by the stables. Just to check." Alara's lips curled into the faintest of smiles. "I'll be here." And as he disappeared into the shadows of the hall, she felt a flutter of something dangerous and new. Hope, curiosity, and the first spark of something she had never dared to imagine: connection. The castle seemed quieter after that, yet charged with a tension only two hearts could sense. A story had begun, not with grand gestures, but with moments like this, small, subtle, and powerful enough to alter destinies. In the gilded corridors of Castle Eldrith, where the chandeliers gleamed like frozen suns, Countess Madeline paced with slow, deliberate steps. Her emerald eyes flicked over every painting, every statue, as if seeking answers in the cold stone. But it wasn't the halls that troubled her, it was a whisper she had heard in the courtyard, a murmur of curiosity and daring. The prince had been seen near the stables, speaking with the beggar girl. "That girl," Madeline murmured, letting the words curl like smoke through the air. "The one who dares to touch the prince's attention." Her fingers brushed the rim of her crystal goblet, tapping lightly, a rhythm of thought and calculation. Power, she knew, was never granted, it was seized. And now, a threat had appeared where none should exist. Someone outside the court, outside the rules, outside her control. Later, in the council chambers, she gathered the lords and advisers, her voice smooth, commanding. "We have a problem," she said. The words hung heavy. "A girl of no rank, of no family, is moving too close to the prince. If she influences him, even subtly, it could undermine the entire succession. Stability is at stake." Lord Varro frowned. "Surely it's harmless curiosity. The prince will tire of it." "Harmless?" Madeline's voice sharpened. "Do not underestimate the influence of desperation, or of someone who has nothing to lose. That girl has already captured his attention. Do you not see the danger?" The council murmured uneasily. Whispers passed through the tall, echoing hallways, tension settling like dust on every carved surface. Madeline's gaze swept the room, icy and precise. "We cannot allow a beggar to dictate the prince's thoughts. We will plant concerns, doubts. We will remind him of duty, of rank, of the world he is born to rule. And if persuasion fails," she let the words hang, a promise of consequences unsaid but clearly understood. The lords nodded, some reluctantly, others with eager eyes. Her control was subtle, invisible, yet absolute. By the end of the meeting, the wheels of manipulation had already begun to turn. Later, alone in her chambers, Madeline walked to the window, watching the distant stables where she knew the girl worked. A smile curved her lips, delicate and dangerous. "You think you can move unnoticed," she whispered. "But I see everything. And I will ensure your place in this castle is only temporary, or more precarious than you dare imagine." The rain began to fall again, tapping against the glass, a rhythm that matched the Countess's heartbeat, steady, deliberate, inevitable. The first moves of a larger game had begun. And while Alara believed she was merely surviving, she had already entered a battlefield ruled by strategy, ambition, and cold calculation. And Madeline? She was ready to strike before the girl ever understood the rules. The quiet tension of the castle deepened. Secrets, promises, and veiled threats threaded through the halls, and the stage was set for a collision no one, not the prince, not the girl, not the court, could avoid. The castle's corridors were quieter than the bustling streets, yet the echoes of labor and whispers of worry lingered in every corner. Alara moved among them, unnoticed by most, yet attuned to the small sufferings that went unseen. A maid struggling under a heavy tray, a stable boy with a fevered brow, an old cook whose hands shook as he chopped vegetables. "Here, let me help," she whispered softly, slipping a warm cloth to the boy and steadying the maid's tray. The cook blinked in surprise as she placed herbs near him. "It's nothing," she said quickly. "Just take care of yourself." The small acts did not go unnoticed. Hidden behind doors or in shadows, servants watched her, whispers beginning to form. She's different," one said. "Quiet but careful. Thoughtful. Brave." By the afternoon, word had reached others in the castle. The quiet nobility who preferred order to chaos, those who worked behind the scenes to maintain dignity in a world ruled by power and fear. Some lords' aides, servants, Even a few guards began observing Alara in secret, noting her patience, her courage, her refusal to bow to the hierarchy while still performing her duties with care. "You see her?" murmured one stable hand to another. "She's not like the others. She doesn't complain, doesn't steal, doesn't beg for attention. And yet she makes everything better." Alara herself barely noticed the quiet admiration. Her focus was on the tasks, on fixing what could be fixed, lifting spirits where she could. She patched torn sleeves, shared a smile with the exhausted kitchen girls, whispered encouragement to a guard practicing drills in the courtyard. Each small gesture, unnoticed by the majority, began to weave a quiet network of loyalty and trust. In the library, she arranged fallen scrolls and books, stacking them carefully for the scholars who often worked late. One of the senior scribes paused, adjusting his spectacles. "You have a steady hand," he said quietly, "and a good heart. I've seen few with such resolve." Alara's cheeks warmed, but she offered only a nod. Words were secondary, action spoke louder. By evening, small acts of kindness had created ripples. A hidden ally delivered a message, another a small token of thanks. Some guards, reluctant at first, found themselves subtly defending her when others mocked or criticized. Quietly, carefully, she was building influence without knowing it. And somewhere above, unseen, Prince Alistair watched from a balcony. He saw her move among the people of the castle, carrying herself with the same courage and quiet dignity that had drawn him to her in the first place. A flicker of pride crossed his features, and something deeper, unspoken, took root in his chest. Alara had entered the castle as a beggar, humble and unseen. Now, through patience, courage, and compassion, she was becoming more than that. She was a presence, a force. And though Madeline had plotted against her, the girl in the stables had already begun to gather allies who would one day change the course of events. Small, unseen, unnoticed by the many, but impossible to ignore by those who mattered most. The castle corridors, once familiar to Alara, now felt heavier. Whispers followed her like shadows, and eyes that had once looked on with quiet admiration now seemed sharpened with suspicion. Word of her growing bond with Prince Alistair had reached every corner of the court. Some were intrigued, others furious, but all were watching. That morning, a summons arrived. The captain of the guard, a stern man named Sir Cedric, appeared at the stables. "The prince's presence near you has raised concern," he said, voice low but firm. "You are to have no further contact with His Highness. Understand?" Alara's hands froze mid-motion, mucked straw clattering to the floor. I don't understand," she stammered. "I've done nothing wrong." "You are a servant," Cedric interrupted sharply. "And there are rules you are expected to follow. The prince is under scrutiny, and you must not appear in proximity." Her heart tightened. The corridor seemed to narrow around her, the stables suddenly colder. Rules won't protect anyone from injustice," she whispered, more to herself than to him. Cedric gave a sympathetic glance, then left. Alara wiped her hands on her apron, trying to steady her breath. But the words lingered like iron chains. She knew this was only the first move in a larger strategy to keep her away from Alistair. Later, in the courtyard, Alistair appeared, riding silently toward her. The moment she saw him, hope surged, and then faltered as she recalled Cedric's warning. "You shouldn't be here," she said softly, stepping back. "Neither should you," he replied, dismounting carefully. "I've been told. I cannot speak with you, cannot see you freely. Yet," his eyes softened, searching hers. "Yet I cannot stay away." Her lips trembled. "They want to separate us. Countess Madeline, the council, they see me as a threat." Alistair's jaw tightened. "They see what they wish. But I see you, Alara. And that is enough." A guard passed, eyes sharp. Alistair straightened, posture rigid, but he let his hand linger near hers, just long enough to communicate defiance without breaking protocol. The social tension was palpable. Servants whispered about the forbidden connection as they passed, noble women glared behind fans, and courtiers murmured plans to reinforce separation. Every corridor, every meal, every chance encounter was now fraught with scrutiny. Alara felt the walls closing in, but she refused to yield. She lifted her chin, brushing damp hair from her face. "They may try to divide us," she said quietly. "But courage cannot be commanded." Alistair nodded, his hand brushing hers for a fleeting moment. "We will find a way," he said, eyes burning with a mixture of determination and frustration. "No law, no decree, no whisper in these halls can undo what matters between us." The sun dipped behind the castle towers, casting long shadows over the courtyard. Even as the world pressed down with rules, expectations, and whispers of scandal, two hearts had aligned in quiet rebellion. And far above, unseen, Madeline watched from a balcony, her smile cold, knowing the tension she had planted would only grow. She did not yet realize, however, that the fire she sought to smother was already smoldering. Quietly, dangerously, impossible to contain. The stage was set for a collision of wills, a test of loyalty, and the beginning of a struggle that would challenge not only the walls of Arvindel but the very rules of the kingdom itself. The library of Castle Eldrith was a sanctuary of silence, dust, and faint candlelight. Shelves towered above Alara, filled with leather-bound tomes that smelled of ink, parchment, and time itself. She moved carefully between the aisles, her fingers brushing over spines, searching not for a book, but for answers she didn't yet fully understand. The silver pendant at her neck glinted under the candlelight. She traced its worn crest absently, feeling the smooth surface beneath her fingertips. Something about it pulsed, subtle but insistent, as if whispering secrets of a life she had never known. Her eyes fell on a small, neglected ledger wedged between two volumes. Curiosity nudged her closer. She opened it carefully, and the brittle pages revealed a record of noble births, lost heirs, and missing heirs. Her breath caught as she traced the names with shaking fingers. Symbols, crests, and dates aligned strangely familiar. "Alara?" she whispered under her breath, her voice trembling. Her fingers tightened on the pendant. The crest carved into the silver matched the markings in the ledger, an old, almost forgotten emblem of a family long believed gone from Arvindel. Footsteps echoed down the hall. She froze. Prince Alistair appeared at the doorway, watching silently, a mixture of curiosity and concern on his face. "You shouldn't be here," he murmured, though he made no move to stop her. I found something," she admitted, voice barely audible. "Something about this pendant." She held it up, letting the candlelight glint off its surface. "It's connected to a noble family, one that disappeared years ago." Alistair stepped closer, eyes narrowing thoughtfully. "You mean, you may be of noble blood?" "I don't know," she said. "I've always been told I was an orphan. But this suggests otherwise. Maybe my life before the streets wasn't what I thought." He reached out, his hand brushing hers for a fleeting moment. "Then this changes everything. But you must be careful. Not everyone in the court would welcome this revelation, especially Madeline." Alara nodded, swallowing the lump in her throat. Her world, once simple and survival-driven, had shifted. The streets had taught her how to endure. The stables had taught her how to thrive. Now the library, dusty, silent, secretive, whispered of a past that could alter her future entirely. She leaned over the ledger again, piecing together names, dates, and family crests. Each connection was a thread, weaving a tapestry that included her. A tapestry hidden from the world, but alive in symbols, history, and bloodlines. Alistair watched quietly, silent but attentive. "Whatever your past holds," he said finally, voice low, "it doesn't change who you are. Courage, compassion, integrity, those are not born from titles." Alara's eyes met his. I hope they are enough." "They are more than enough," he replied, a quiet conviction in his tone. "But you'll need allies. And knowledge. And strategy." A soft wind stirred through the open window, rustling pages and drawing shadows across the floor. Outside, the castle seemed to hold its breath. Inside, a new truth had begun to surface, fragile, dangerous, yet luminous with promise. The pendant pulsed again, subtly, almost as if alive. A key, a signal, a reminder of a destiny long buried. And for the first time, Alara felt that perhaps her place was not among the streets or the stables alone, but somewhere far greater, in a world that had almost forgotten her, yet could not remain without her. The journey ahead would demand courage, wit, and heart. And with Alistair silently at her side, the first threads of destiny began to weave a new path, one neither of them could have foreseen. The night was thick with mist, curling through the castle's outer courtyards like a living thing. Alara moved quietly along the stone hallways, her lantern casting flickering shadows on the walls. Beside her, Alistair's presence was steady and silent, his hand occasionally brushing hers, a reminder of trust, of connection, and of protection. They had discovered the hidden archives, a small chamber beneath the castle long abandoned, its entrance concealed behind a tapestry depicting the royal lineage. Dust and cobwebs clung to every surface, and the scent of old parchment hung heavy. But within these forgotten records lay truths long buried. Alara's hands trembled as she turned the fragile pages of a ledger. Names, dates, decrees, and cryptic notes filled the margins, evidence of deals, betrayals, and sudden disappearances. And then she found it. The records of her family, once noble, once influential. They were eliminated, she whispered, voice breaking. Every member. Every record wiped clean. Alistair bent closer, his eyes scanning the same pages. This wasn't natural. It wasn't illness or accident. Someone orchestrated this. Systematically. Alara pressed her fingers to the pendant at her neck, feeling the cold silver burn slightly against her skin. The crest, it matches theirs. It was a warning, maybe a signal, or a promise that their line would end. Her chest tightened, the weight of betrayal and loss pressing down. Madeline, she said softly, realization dawning. She must have wanted them gone. To secure power. To remove anyone who could challenge her influence. Alistair's jaw clenched, fists curling at his sides. This changes everything. You were never just a girl from the streets. You were targeted because of your blood. And now they've underestimated the strength that blood carries. Alara's eyes filled with both sorrow and fire. I thought I had no past, that I was nothing. But this was stolen from me. And they thought they could bury it, erase me. But they were wrong. Alistair placed a hand on her shoulder, steadying her shaking form. You are not alone. And they will pay for every wrong committed against you. The wind outside howled, rattling the old wooden doors. Shadows danced across the walls, echoing the tumult in Alara's heart. She felt the weight of generations pressing on her shoulders, a legacy stolen, a name erased, and a life that had been rewritten by deceit. We need proof, Alistair said, voice low but urgent. Evidence that can't be ignored. Documentation, witnesses, something that can confront Madeline and her allies. And we'll need allies within the court. Alara nodded, gripping the pendant tightly. I'll find it. Every hidden ledger, every secret document. They think they buried me, but I'll uncover the truth. And when they realize I've survived, they will see the consequences. For the first time, the fear that had followed her since the streets, since the loss of her family, transformed into something else, determination. This was not merely survival. This was justice. Alistair looked at her, his expression a mixture of awe and reverence. You are stronger than I ever imagined, he said. And together, we can turn the tide. Alara closed her eyes for a moment, letting the weight of the revelation settle. She could feel the power of her lineage coursing through her veins, a reminder of who she was, and who she could become. The pendant pulsed faintly against her chest, as if acknowledging its bearer, as if confirming the resurgence of a line thought extinct. Their conspiracy, she whispered, won't succeed. Not if I have anything to do with it. Alistair nodded, stepping closer, his presence protective and unwavering. Then we move forward, careful but relentless. The castle, the court, and Madeline herself, they will learn that a line that was thought destroyed cannot be erased so easily. Outside, the mist thickened, hiding the castle in a veil of uncertainty. Inside, a spark had ignited, the first step in a reckoning that would shake Arvindale to its very foundations. Alara's eyes met Alistair's. In that glance, unspoken promises passed between them. Courage, loyalty, and a determination that would defy both past betrayals and future schemes. The turning point had arrived. Nothing would ever be the same. The grand hall of Castle Eldrith felt colder than usual that evening, shadows stretching across the marble floors, lit only by flickering torchlight. Alara stood at the threshold, her heart hammering, the silver pendant heavy against her chest. Across the hall, Countess Madeline sat perched on a gilded chair, her posture regal, her eyes sharp, calculating and cold. So, Madeline's voice purred, carrying effortlessly across the empty hall. The beggar girl has learned her past. Alara's fists clenched at her sides. You, she whispered, voice trembling between fury and disbelief. You destroyed them. My family, you killed them. Madeline smiled, slow and deliberate, her emerald eyes glinting in the torchlight. Destroyed? No, my dear. I removed obstacles. Your family was influential, ambitious, dangerous to the stability of this court. Every move I made was for power. And for survival. You call murder stability? Lies survival? Alara's voice cracked, echoing in the hall. You left nothing. Nothing but me. You thought you could erase us. The Countess stood, gliding forward like a predator. And yet here you are. Alive. Clever. Bold. I underestimated you, I admit. But do not mistake my underestimation for mercy. Alistair stepped beside Alara, placing a protective hand over hers. Enough, he said, his voice steady but filled with controlled fury. Your games end tonight. This ends now. Madeline's smile widened, but there was a flicker of calculation in her eyes. Ah, the prince intervenes. How touching. Do you even understand what you are up against? I have moved kings, shaped alliances, and erased threats. A mere girl cannot undo decades of strategy. I am not a mere girl. Alara snapped, stepping forward, her voice gaining strength. I am her daughter. Her blood runs through me. And you underestimated what survives in the shadows, what grows in silence. Maidlin's expression faltered slightly, a subtle tightening at the corners of her mouth. Bold words, but will they protect you when the court turns against you? When allies vanish and secrets are revealed? Alara's eyes blazed. Then I will find allies. I will uncover every hidden truth. I will fight, not for revenge alone, but for justice. For my family. For the people you sought to control. You will not win. The pendant at her neck glinted sharply in the torchlight, catching Maidlin's gaze for the first time with visible unease. That trinket, where did it come from? The Countess demanded, her voice tense. Alara held it aloft. It comes from a line you thought extinguished. A family you tried to bury. But it lives. I live. Maidlin's eyes narrowed. The air thickened with tension, heavy as iron. So the game has changed, she said quietly, almost a hiss. And yet, you think mere courage can topple years of power? Alistair tightened his hand on Alara's shoulder, his gaze unwavering. It's not just courage. It's truth. And truth cannot be suppressed forever. For a moment, the hall was silent except for the faint crackle of the torches. Shadows danced across Maidlin's face, hinting at rage, calculation, and fear. For the first time, she realized Alara was not just surviving. She was preparing to fight, to reclaim what was stolen, and to challenge every scheme woven against her. Alara met Maidlin's gaze, steady, unflinching. Your reign of manipulation ends here. The blood you spilled cries for justice. And I will answer it. Maidlin's lips pressed into a thin line, and with a last, measured glance she turned sharply, retreating toward her chambers. The sound of her heels echoed like a promise. The war was only beginning. Alara exhaled slowly, the weight of revelation settling around her. Her family was gone, her past stolen, yet in that confrontation, she had discovered something stronger. Her own power, her own courage, and the resolve to reclaim what was taken. Alistair stepped closer, offering a hand, a silent promise of support. We face this together, he said. Alara nodded, clutching the pendant. Together, she repeated, her voice firm. And this time we will not fail. The hall remained silent, but the air vibrated with unspoken vows. Secrets had been unearthed. Betrayals had been confronted. And from that moment the battle lines were drawn, both in the court and in their hearts. The night sky stretched over Castle Eldrith like a velvet canvas, stars glimmering faintly through the drifting clouds. In the castle gardens, hidden from the watchful eyes of the court, Alara leaned against the fountain, water glinting like molten silver in the moonlight. Her hair was damp from a sudden drizzle, and her cheeks glowed from exertion and lingering adrenaline. Alistair approached slowly, footsteps soft on the stone path. His usual regal composure softened in the quiet intimacy of the garden. You shouldn't be here, he murmured, though his tone carried neither command nor warning, only concern. I couldn't stay inside, Alara replied, brushing a strand of wet hair from her face. Too many whispers, too much pressure. He stopped beside her, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. The scent of rain and earth clung to her, grounding him in a way no courtly ceremony ever had. Then neither of us should hide, he said quietly. Not tonight. They stood in silence, the fountain gurgling softly, the world reduced to this small, fragile moment. Alistair's gaze never wavered, tracing the curve of her face, the set of her jaw, the fire in her eyes. Alara, he said finally, voice low, urgent. I've watched you from the moment you stood for that child in the streets. I've seen you endure every insult, every cruelty, and still rise brighter, stronger. And he paused, swallowing, as if the weight of his next words could shatter him. I cannot pretend my heart is untouched. I cannot hide what I feel. Her breath caught. Alistair, she whispered, uncertain, yet leaning closer. He reached for her hand, fingers brushing hers, a spark igniting where skin met skin. I am not a prince in this moment, he said. I am just a man who sees you, who admires you, who loves you. Alara's eyes widened, heart thundering in her chest. The air seemed to vibrate with the intensity of his words. I thought. I could never. You're too much for someone like me, she stammered, emotion choking her voice. He shook his head, pressing her hand gently to his chest. Do not say that. Do not diminish yourself. You are more than anyone here deserves to see. And I choose you. Not your past, not your station, not your fears. I choose you, Alara. The words hung in the air, heavier than any sword, more luminous than any torch. Tears pricked at the corners of her eyes as relief, joy, and disbelief collided. Slowly, she reached up, brushing her fingers along his cheek. Alistair. I choose you too. For a heartbeat, the garden held its breath. Then, as if the world itself approved, he leaned in, and their lips met in a tentative, trembling kiss. The night seemed to exhale around them, the fountain's gentle splash a rhythm to the pulse of their hearts. When they pulled apart, foreheads resting together, neither spoke at first. Words were unnecessary. In the silent communion of touch and gaze, a bond had formed that no court intrigue, no plot could sever. I have waited, Alistair whispered, for someone like you, someone brave enough to defy expectation, to defy fear. And now, I will not let go. Alara smiled through tears, leaning into him. Nor will I, she said, the conviction in her voice steady and unwavering. Whatever comes, we face it together. The moonlight bathed them in silver, the castle looming silently in the distance, a reminder of the dangers waiting beyond the garden walls. But for a moment, nothing existed but the two of them, hearts aligned, hands entwined, courage and love flowing freely between them. And as the first drops of rain from the lingering storm splashed around them, they stood together, knowing the world could try to tear them apart, but their hearts had already declared victory. The spark of love was no longer hidden. It burned bright, defiant, and unbreakable. The morning sun cast long shadows across the royal hall, but its warmth could not penetrate the cold tension that had gripped Castle Eldrith. Servants whispered nervously in corridors, and the guards moved with unusual rigidity. Today, the court would witness the power of manipulation, and Alara would become its target. Countess Madeline stood at the head of the council chamber, her posture flawless, her eyes glinting with calculated malice. The princess of the streets, she said, her voice silky but venomous, has overstepped her place. Evidence has come to light suggesting a conspiracy aimed at undermining the crown itself. Gasps erupted around the chamber. Courtiers leaned forward, faces painted with shock and suspicion. Alistair's eyes widened, heart pounding, as he scanned the room, trying to understand the sudden charge. You mean, Alara? He demanded, voice rising. She's done nothing. She. Madeline's smile was cruel, unyielding. She has moved in secret, spoken with servants, influenced the prince, and gained allies within the castle. All of which is suspicious when combined with her unknown past and mysterious connections. Alara, standing near the doorway, felt her pulse quicken. This is a lie, she whispered, voice trembling. I have done nothing to betray anyone. I only. Silence. Madeline's voice cut through the hall like steel. The court has rules. Suspicion alone is sufficient when backed by evidence and testimony, which, thanks to my careful efforts, exists. Guards moved forward, armored hands clanging against the stone floor. Alara stepped back, her eyes locking with Alistair's. His face was pale, jaw tight, but his gaze urged her to remain strong. Do you truly intend to arrest her? Alistair demanded, stepping in front of her. She is innocent. Madeline's smile did not falter. Innocence is irrelevant to the stability of the crown. The law is absolute. The court demands action. Before either could react further, the captain of the guard, Sir Cedric, stepped forward with grim precision. By order of the council, you are under arrest for conspiring against the crown. He gestured to the armored guards behind him. Alara's knees buckled slightly, but she forced herself to stand tall. You're making a terrible mistake, she said, voice low but firm. The truth will come out. Madeline's laugh was soft, dangerous. The truth? My dear girl, the truth is what I define it to be. And soon, the kingdom will see you as nothing more than a traitor. Alistair's hands clenched at his sides, fury burning in his chest. I will not allow this, he said, voice barely controlled. You are lying, and I will prove it. You cannot touch her while I. Madeline's gaze flicked to him, icy and sharp. Prince Alistair, your concern is noted. But the law is the law. The guards stepped closer, and Alara was surrounded. Each movement was precise, leaving no chance for escape. Her eyes met Alistair's one final time before being led away. His expression was a mixture of rage, helplessness, and determination. As they marched her through the castle corridors, the whispers grew louder. Servants glanced nervously at her, some sympathetic, some fearful. She's innocent, one whispered, but the walls of power allowed no protection here. In the prison chamber, the door clanged shut behind her. The room was cold, damp, and silent except for the distant echo of the castle. Alara sank to the floor, her hands clutching the pendant at her neck. "They think they can break me," she murmured to herself. "But they have only made me stronger." Above, in the council chambers, Madeline leaned against the marble railing, satisfied. "Let them see," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Let them witness what happens when the lowly defy their place." Alara's resolve hardened. The stakes had risen. The game had escalated beyond whispers and secret glances. Now her life, her honor, and her love were directly threatened. And somewhere in the shadows, Alistair's mind raced, planning, vowing. He would not allow her to remain imprisoned. Madeline may have orchestrated the perfect trap, but the battle was far from over. Alara touched the pendant again, feeling its pulse against her chest. It was more than a piece of silver now. It was a reminder of her lineage, her purpose, and the courage that had carried her through every trial. The struggle was just beginning, and the castle had already become a battlefield of hearts, power, and destiny. The cell was cold, damp, and suffocating. Moonlight seeped through the narrow bars, painting silver lines across the rough stone floor. Alara sat huddled in the corner, her knees drawn to her chest, the pendant pressed tightly against her heart. Every breath felt heavy, weighted with betrayal, fear, and exhaustion. Tears slid silently down her cheeks, mixing with the dirt and grime of the cell. She had survived the streets, the stables, whispers of contempt, and now, the walls of the castle itself sought to crush her spirit. "Why me?" she whispered into the darkness. "Why did they take everything from me?" Her fingers traced the intricate crest on the pendant, and a memory sparked, a fleeting glimpse of a garden, a warm voice, her mother's lullaby. The visions came unbidden, fragments of a past long hidden, long stolen. And then the truth began to unfurl. Hidden documents, letters secreted in the archives, confessions whispered by allies in hushed tones. The story of her family's destruction was laid bare before her mind. Her parents had been leaders of a noble house that dared to challenge corruption, to oppose the machinations of those who craved unchecked power. Madeline had orchestrated it all. Lies, betrayals, assassinations. A coup hidden beneath courtly politeness. The noble family of Alara had been systematically erased to consolidate control, and the girl who had survived on the streets was the last living heir. Alara's hands trembled, tightening on the pendant as realization struck with bone-deep clarity. "All of this, it was never random," she whispered. "Every hardship, every loss, it led to this moment. They wanted to break me. But I am not broken." The door creaked softly, and a sliver of shadow fell across the cell. Alistair's voice came, low and urgent. "Alara, are you alive?" "Yes," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. I've learned everything." He stepped closer, crouching near the bars. "Tell me," he urged gently. She recounted the story, voice shaking but resolute. Every betrayal, every loss, every act of cruelty meticulously plotted by Madeline and the council. And through it all, her own survival had been more than luck. It had been instinct, courage, and the will to endure. When she finished, silence hung between them. Alistair reached through the bars, taking her hands in his. "You are stronger than any of them imagined," he said, voice rich with admiration and urgency. "This truth, it makes you unstoppable." Alara looked into his eyes, finding clarity amid the storm of her emotions. "I have nothing left to fear," she said quietly, almost to herself. "I have lost everything, yet gained knowledge, courage, and the will to reclaim what was stolen." The pendant at her neck pulsed faintly, as if affirming her resolve. It was no longer just a relic of the past. It was a symbol of her lineage, her purpose, and her destiny. "Tonight we act," Alistair said firmly. "You are not alone in this. Madeline may have taken everything from you, but she underestimated the bond we share, and the strength you carry within yourself." Alara drew a deep breath, letting the weight of fear dissolve into determination. The despair of the prison walls, the sting of betrayal, and the echo of loss all transformed into fire. "Then we move," she said. "We expose her. We reclaim my family's name. And we protect those who cannot protect themselves." The moonlight shifted, illuminating the edges of the cell, casting long shadows. Yet inside, a spark had ignited, bright, fierce, and unyielding. Alara was no longer the girl who had endured the streets. She was the heiress of a line thought extinct, a force shaped by suffering, strengthened by love, and guided by unshakable justice. Alistair squeezed her hands, a silent promise of support. "Whatever comes," he said, "we face it together." Alara nodded, her eyes reflecting a new resolve. "Together," she echoed. The cell felt less like a prison now, and more like the forge where her courage and destiny had been tempered. Outside, the castle slumbered in deceptive quiet. Inside, a storm of determination raged, and the final confrontation, one that would determine the fate of Arvindel, her family, and the love they shared, was imminent. For the first time, Alara felt the full weight of her past and the boundless potential of her future. Nothing could stop her now. The council chamber buzzed with hushed whispers as courtiers glanced nervously at one another. Sunlight spilled through tall stained-glass windows, casting fractured colors across marble floors, yet the warmth of the morning could not reach the icy tension in the room. Alastair strode into the chamber, every movement deliberate, the weight of authority and defiance pressing behind his steps. "Silence!" he commanded, his voice cutting through the murmurs. The courtiers froze, eyes wide with shock at his audacity. Madeline sat poised at the head of the council table, her expression unreadable, yet her emerald eyes betrayed a flicker of unease. "Your Highness," she said smoothly, this outburst. Alastair's gaze was unwavering, sharp as steel. "Enough of your lies, Madeline. Enough of your manipulations. You have accused Alara of treachery without evidence, without honor, and without conscience. She is innocent, and I will not allow you to destroy her." The council murmured again, shock rippling through the assembly. Some shifted uncomfortably, aware of the prince's determination. Others exchanged knowing glances, loyal to Madeline's subtle influence. "Prince Alastair," Madeline countered, voice silky but edged with warning, "the law is clear." Her actions. "The law is meaningless when wielded by deceit." Alastair interrupted, slamming a fist onto the council table. The sound echoed like a clap of thunder, silencing all further murmurs. "You speak of rules and evidence, yet you have twisted every fact to your own ends. My father, the king, may be ill, but even he deserves honesty, not your scheming." The king, seated weakly on his throne at the far end of the hall, stirred. His eyes, clouded by illness but sharp with lingering authority, shifted toward Alastair. "My son," he rasped, voice frail but carrying weight. Alastair stepped forward, unwavering. "Father, the girl you know as Alara is no traitor. She is your ally, a daughter of Arvindel whose family you may have thought lost. Madeline has orchestrated lies to consolidate power, to manipulate this court. You must see the truth before more injustice is done." The courtiers gasped, the room vibrating with tension. Whispers turned into cautious speculation. Madeline's calm composure faltered ever so slightly, a subtle twitch at the corner of her mouth betraying the storm she felt inside. "Evidence," Alastair continued, producing letters, ledgers, and documents he and Alara had secured. "Proof of her innocence. Proof of Madeline's conspiracy against the crown. Every forged claim, every falsified accusation, it is all here." The king leaned forward weakly, eyes narrowing at the documents. The room grew still, as if the walls themselves waited for his verdict. Madeline's voice was sharp now, slicing through the silence. "You dare undermine the court, the council, and the crown itself?" Alastair met her gaze with unyielding determination. "I dare," he said, voice steady. "I dare because the innocent cannot suffer while the guilty prosper. I dare because justice must prevail, and Alara will not be destroyed by your ambition." For a moment, time seemed suspended. The king's hand trembled as he reached for the documents. Slowly, deliberately, he scanned the evidence. The color drained from Madeline's face, as the truth settled into the room like a living thing. This cannot be ignored," the king said finally, voice faint but firm. "The girl speaks truth. The evidence confirms it. Madeline, you have betrayed the trust of this court and of your sovereign." Gasps rippled through the chamber. Alastair stepped closer to the king's side, offering his unwavering support. "Father, release her. Reinstate her honor. And let the kingdom witness the truth, not the lies of one who seeks only power." The courtiers shifted, some bowing their heads in shame, others murmuring agreements. Madeline's composure cracked. Her emerald eyes darted around, calculating escape, but the weight of exposure pinned her like a shadow. Alastair's gaze softened slightly as he thought of Alara, imprisoned yet unbroken. "Justice will be done," he whispered, almost to himself, but the words carried through the chamber, unshakable and commanding. The king, raising a trembling hand, finally decreed, "Alara shall be freed and her name restored. Any further accusations without proof will be considered treason against the crown." A ripple of relief spread through the room. Alastair exhaled slowly, his shoulders relaxing just enough to feel hope. The path was set. The truth had emerged, and the power of lies had finally been confronted. Outside the council chamber, the sun broke through the clouds, spilling golden light across the castle. It was a new dawn for Arvindel, a dawn where courage, loyalty, and love had won, even against deceit and ambition. The sun dipped low behind the castle walls, casting long, menacing shadows across the courtyard. The air was thick with anticipation, heavy with the murmurs of the gathered crowd. Torches flickered along the stone paths, their flames dancing nervously in the evening breeze. Alara was led forward, her hands bound in simple, coarse ropes, her head held high despite the fear gnawing at her chest. Each step echoed across the courtyard, a drumbeat of impending doom. She could see the execution platform ahead, the rough wooden scaffold stark against the twilight sky. Whispers rolled through the crowd like a wave. Some eyes were sympathetic, others eager for spectacle, all drawn by the weight of the moment. The sheriff's guards flanked her, rigid and unyielding, their armor glinting coldly in the torchlight. Alara of Arvindel, the chief executioner's voice boomed, steady and unflinching. "You stand accused of treason against the crown. How do you plead?" Alara's voice trembled, but her gaze remained unwavering. "Innocent," she declared, loud enough for the crowd to hear, her words cutting through the murmurs. "I have done nothing against the crown. Only truth and justice guided my actions." The executioner's axe gleamed ominously, catching the last rays of the dying sun. The crowd stirred, some shifting uncomfortably, aware that the tension could snap at any moment. Madeline watched from her place of authority, eyes cold, lips curved into a calculated smile. She had orchestrated this moment to solidify her power, and she reveled in the fear radiating from the innocent girl. Alara's mind raced, memories and strategies colliding. Every harsh winter on the streets, every betrayal, every lesson learned in the castle. It all had led to this moment. She drew a steadying breath, feeling the pulse of the pendant at her chest, a faint, reassuring warmth. A sudden murmur rippled through the crowd. Alastair appeared at the edge of the courtyard, his armor glinting, eyes blazing with fury and determination. Every step he took seemed to shake the ground beneath the spectators' feet. "Wait!" he shouted, voice booming over the assembly. "She is innocent. I, Prince Alastair, demand a halt to this execution." The guards hesitated, uncertainty flickering in their eyes. The executioner's hand tightened on the axe handle, yet even he paused, the weight of the prince's authority pressing upon the court. Madeline's expression darkened, rage flashing in her eyes. "Do you dare defy me here, Prince? Do you not see the consequences?" Alastair's gaze was steel, unwavering. "I see clearly, Madeline. I see your lies, your manipulations, and your betrayal. And I will not allow this injustice to continue." Alara's heart pounded as the distance between her and Alastair seemed to shrink, hope flickering amidst fear. The crowd held its collective breath, the suspense tightening around the courtyard like a noose. The executioner shifted uneasily, torn between duty and doubt. A few of the courtiers exchanged worried glances, some beginning to question Madeline's control. "Alara is the blood of Arvindel," Alastair shouted, stepping closer to the scaffold. "Her name carries truth, honor, and justice. No lie will claim her life while I stand here." The crowd's whispers grew louder, some cheering, others shocked by the prince's defiance. Torches flickered in the growing wind, casting chaotic shadows across the faces of the spectators. Alara's pulse raced, every nerve alive with anticipation. This was the moment where fate balanced on a knife's edge, life and death, justice and deceit, love and fear intertwined in a single heartbeat. She gripped the pendant, feeling the warmth intensify, as if lending her courage. "I will not fall here," she whispered to herself. "Not while the truth survives. Not while love stands beside me." The executioner's axe gleamed one last time, poised to fall, yet the suspense was unbearable, stretched taut across the courtyard. Every eye was fixed on the girl who had endured so much. Every breath held in anticipation of what would come next. Outside, the wind picked up, carrying a hint of change, a promise that the moment of reckoning, the intervention that could turn despair into triumph, was approaching. Alara's gaze lifted to Alastair, his presence a beacon amid the looming terror. And in that glance, the crowd could sense the shift, the calm before the storm, the turning point where courage and love might yet defy death itself. The tension was absolute. The execution platform, the axe, the ropes, all symbols of imminent peril, stood in sharp contrast to the spark of hope that now burned fiercely in Alara's heart. The moment of suspense had reached its peak. The question hung in the air. Would darkness claim her, or would the truth, the love, and the courage of Arvindel prevail? The courtyard fell silent, tension choking the air like a thick fog. Torches flickered along the stone walls, casting dancing shadows over the assembled crowd. Alara's heart pounded, every step toward the scaffold echoing in her ears. She could feel the cold grip of the ropes, the rough wood beneath her fingers, and the edge of the axe glinting menacingly in the dying light. Then, like a storm breaking, a commanding voice rang out. "Stop!" Alistair's figure appeared at the edge of the platform, eyes blazing, armor glinting as he strode forward. Every step reverberated with authority and purpose. The crowd froze, gasps rippling through the assembly. Guards shifted nervously, unsure whether to obey the prince or continue with the grim ceremony. "I will not allow this," Alistair shouted, his voice carrying over the courtyard. "Alara is innocent. She has committed no crime against the crown, and any who claim otherwise are deceivers and traitors." Maitland's composure faltered, her eyes narrowing, lips tightening. "Prince Alistair," she began, but he cut her off, stepping closer to the scaffold, his gaze fixed on her like steel. "You have manipulated, lied, and murdered in the shadows to claim power." Alistair continued, voice rising with righteous fury. "Your treachery ends here, before the eyes of the kingdom." He turned to Alara, his expression softening, filled with warmth and love. "Alara," he said, extending his hand, "I love you. I always have. Not for your title, not for your past, but for your courage, your heart, and the strength that has carried you through every trial." Tears streamed down her face, blurring the axe and the torches, but she reached for him, fingers trembling yet resolute. "Alistair," she whispered, voice choked with emotion. "I will not let them take you," he said firmly, grasping her hands. "You are my heart, my equal, my queen in all but name. And I swear before this kingdom, I will defend you, always." The crowd held its breath as Alistair produced the documents, letters, and ledgers that exposed Maitland's schemes. "Behold the truth," he declared. "The accusations against Alara are lies. The girl you see is the last heir of Arvindel's noble line, and those who plotted against her have betrayed this kingdom." Shock rippled through the assembly. Courtiers exchanged stunned glances. Whispers turned into murmurs of disbelief. Maitland's eyes widened, the color draining from her face as her plans unraveled in real time. The executioner's hand faltered on the axe, the weight of justice pressing upon him. Guards glanced at one another, uncertainty replacing obedience. Alistair's authority, backed by the evidence and his unwavering courage, held the courtyard in tense suspense. "Release her," Alistair commanded, voice resonant, filled with unyielding power. "By royal decree and truth alike, she is innocent. Let the kingdom see her for what she truly is." The captain of the guard hesitated, then stepped forward, loosening the ropes that bound Alara. The axe was lowered, its gleam no longer a threat, but a symbol of justice deferred. Alara's knees nearly buckled, overwhelmed by relief and emotion, but Alistair's steady grip kept her upright. Around them, the courtiers began to murmur in approval, some bowing in acknowledgement, others realizing the full extent of Maitland's treachery. Maitland shrank back, her pride and ambition undone before the eyes of the kingdom. This cannot be," she whispered, but the court no longer feared her. The truth was undeniable. Alistair pulled Alara close, holding her in front of the kingdom, his chest rising with each breath, voice firm yet tender. "This is the girl I love, the girl whose courage and heart defy fear itself. Let all who seek to deceive and destroy know. Justice will prevail, and love will endure." The crowd erupted in astonishment, then cheers, as the tension dissolved into triumph. Torches flickered brighter, sunlight breaking through the clouds above the courtyard, as if the heavens themselves celebrated the moment. Alara rested her forehead against Alistair's, tears mingling with laughter. "You saved me," she whispered. "No," he replied softly, voice strong yet intimate. "We saved each other." The courtyard, once filled with the threat of death and deceit, now radiated relief, justice, and the promise of a new beginning. The kingdom had witnessed truth, courage, and love rise victorious, and in that moment, Alara and Alistair's bond became unshakable, a love forged in trials, strengthened by courage and blessed by justice. The grand hall of Arvindel trembled with the weight of revelation. Courtiers, once obedient to Maitland's cunning influence, now gasped in disbelief as Alistair presented the final pieces of evidence, his voice resonant with authority and conviction. "Behold the truth," he proclaimed. "Every scheme, every betrayal, every attempt to manipulate the crown has been documented. The conspirator stands exposed." Maitland's face paled, her carefully composed mask of composure cracking under the scrutiny of the assembled nobles. This is preposterous," she spat, voice trembling. I did what was necessary for the crown." Alistair stepped closer, gaze unwavering, voice sharp as steel. "Necessary? You sought only power, deceit, and the ruin of innocent lives. Your ambition has ended, Madeline. The king, frail but alert, rose from his throne, his eyes piercing and full of authority. The kingdom has seen the truth. Madeline, your actions betray not just the court, but the crown itself. You will answer for every life you've harmed. The courtiers exchanged hurried glances, whispers swelling into murmurs of outrage. Servants and commoners, long oppressed by the corruption of the court, stepped forward, emboldened by the exposure. "Justice!" they cried. "Let justice be done." Outside the palace gates, the streets echoed with newfound hope. Citizens poured from alleys and marketplaces, fueled by decades of oppression and the courage now revealed in the royal courtyard. Torches and banners fluttered as people gathered, their voices rising in unison, a chorus of revolt against the injustices they had endured. Within the hall, Madeline's attendants faltered, her once loyal allies now wary and divided. Her emerald eyes darted frantically, searching for a path of escape, but the walls of Arvindel no longer shielded her. Alastair's unwavering gaze pinned her, every movement deliberate, the weight of truth pressing inescapably upon her. "Release her!" someone shouted from the crowd, though it was not Alara they demanded, it was the end of corruption itself. "Expose the lies! Punish the guilty!" Alastair's hand found Alara's, squeezing it gently, a silent reassurance. She stood tall beside him, her presence calm yet commanding. "This is our moment," he whispered. "The kingdom will see what courage, truth, and justice can accomplish." Madeline's defiance faltered as she was escorted from the hall by the royal guards, her voice rising in vain protests. The king's gavel-like command echoed, sealing her fate. She would face the full weight of the law, accountable for every betrayal, every act of cruelty, every life harmed by her ambition. The court erupted in cheers, a mixture of relief, vindication, and triumph. Nobles who had been silent or complicit now stepped forward to pledge loyalty to truth and justice. The oppressive shadow Madeline had cast over Arvindel lifted, replaced by clarity and hope. Alara, standing with Alastair, felt the weight of the past lift from her shoulders. She looked out across the crowd, servants, nobles, and commoners alike, all witnesses to the reclamation of justice. The pendant at her neck seemed to pulse warmly, as if affirming the path she had walked, the battles endured, and the triumph now realized. Alastair raised his voice, strong and unwavering. "Let it be known throughout Arvindel, deceit cannot flourish where truth stands. The crown will serve the people, protect the innocent, and punish the guilty." Cheers surged from the hall and echoed into the streets, a tidal wave of relief and celebration. People embraced, tears mingled with laughter, and the weight of oppression began to crumble under the power of exposed truth. Alara's eyes met Alastair's, and in that glance every trial, every heartbreak, every moment of fear and endurance was acknowledged and shared. Together they had faced deception, cruelty, and death itself, and emerged victorious. The palace doors opened wide, sunlight flooding the hall, illuminating the faces of the kingdom united in justice. Arvindel had seen the fall of the corrupt and the rise of courage, truth, and love. As the citizens of Arvindel witnessed Madeline's disgrace and the court's restored integrity, a sense of balance returned. Order was re-established, justice recognized, and the promise of a brighter, fairer future unfolded. Alara's voice, quiet yet firm, cut through the jubilation. "This is what it means to endure, to stand for truth, to fight for justice, and to rise stronger than before." Alastair nodded, pulling her close. "Together we will protect this kingdom. Together we will ensure history remembers not the treachery of one, but the courage of the many." The echoes of triumph resounded throughout Arvindel, a kingdom reborn, where the light of justice had finally banished the shadows of deceit. The castle courtyard was alive with celebration, yet the air carried a sense of reverence. Flags fluttered in the gentle breeze, their colors bright against the morning sun. Citizens, nobles, and servants alike had gathered to witness the restoration of a name long tarnished by lies. Alara stepped forward, her posture poised yet unpretentious. The ropes that once bound her hands were gone, replaced with a simple ceremonial sash signifying her restored status. Courtiers bowed respectfully, some hesitant, others in sincere acknowledgement of her courage and integrity. King Arvindel, frail but steady, raised his hand. By decree of the crown, Alara of Arvindel is fully exonerated. Her honor, her lineage, and her name are restored. Let it be known that justice has been served. A cheer swept through the gathered crowd, rising like a wave and echoing against the castle walls. Children clapped, women and men alike smiled, and even those who had once doubted her courage bowed in acknowledgement. Alara's eyes scanned the crowd, her gaze softening on the faces of those who had suffered alongside her. "I do not seek wealth, power, or titles," she said quietly, her voice carrying steadily over the assembly. "My purpose is to serve, to care for the people, and to protect those who cannot protect themselves." Alastair, standing beside her, squeezed her hand. "You have always been noble, not because of your birthright, but because of your heart," he whispered, his tone filled with admiration and love. Alara turned to him, a small smile touching her lips. "And you have shown me what courage and loyalty truly mean. Together, we can help our kingdom heal." The king nodded, a faint smile breaking across his lined face. "Your humility honors your restored name, Alara. Let your example guide Arvindel into a new era, one of justice, compassion, and courage." Servants who had once scorned her now bowed deeply, and nobles whispered praises, realizing that the girl they had underestimated had shaped the fate of the kingdom. The pendant at her chest gleamed softly in the sunlight, a reminder of her past, her resilience, and the destiny she had embraced. Alara knelt briefly, not in submission to the throne, but in acknowledgement of the people she vowed to serve. "This is your victory as much as mine," she said, her voice warm, reaching across the crowd. "Together we will rebuild, protect, and honor the values that truly matter." Alastair stepped forward, gently lifting her hand. "And together we will face the future, side by side." The assembly erupted in applause, not only for the restoration of Alara's honor, but for the hope she embodied. Arvindel, long shadowed by deceit and corruption, now glimmered with the promise of fairness, compassion, and renewed strength. Alara's gaze lingered on the horizon beyond the castle walls. She thought of the streets she had walked, the people she had helped, and the life she had endured. She understood now that true nobility came from action, courage, and the choice to uplift others, no matter the personal cost. The kingdom had witnessed justice, courage, and love, and Alara, humble yet radiant, had claimed her place, not merely as a noble by birth, but as a true leader of the heart, dedicated to her people and the ideals that had carried her through every trial. The great hall of Arvindel shimmered with golden sunlight, streaming through tall windows that cast colorful patterns across the marble floor. Citizens, nobles, and allies had gathered, their faces glowing with anticipation and joy. Flags adorned every balcony, banners flared in the breeze, and the air hummed with celebration. Alastair stood at the center, dressed in ceremonial attire that gleamed in the morning light. His eyes searched the crowd until they found hers. Alara stepped forward, modest yet radiant, her heart pounding with emotion. The room fell into expectant silence. "Alara," Alastair began, his voice firm yet tender, carrying effortlessly to every corner of the hall. "You have endured trials that would have broken lesser hearts. You have faced deceit, fear, and injustice, yet your courage and spirit have shone brighter than any crown." He knelt gracefully, holding her hands in his. "I love you not for your name, not for your title, but for the strength, kindness, and unwavering heart that defines you. Will you marry me, here before the kingdom, and stand with me as my queen?" Gasps of awe swept through the hall, mingling with murmurs of excitement. Alara's eyes welled with tears, and a soft smile curved her lips. "Yes," she whispered, voice steady despite the storm of emotion inside her. "Yes, Alastair. I will." The crowd erupted into cheers, applause echoing like thunder against the castle walls. Torches flickered, sunlight danced across the banners, and a sense of renewal filled every corner of the hall. The impossible had become reality. Love and justice had prevailed over ambition and deceit. The king, frail but proud, rose to his feet, a smile breaking across his lined face. "Let this day mark a new era for Arvindel. Let the hearts of the people and the courage of the just guide the kingdom forward." Alara and Alastair were crowned together, symbols of hope, unity, and justice. Their crowns gleamed, not merely as symbols of rank, but as emblems of integrity, courage, and enduring love. Alara looked out over the crowd, her gaze lingering on faces young and old, noble and humble alike. She spoke softly but with conviction. "No one is powerless when they stand for truth. Courage, compassion, and justice can change the world, even when the odds seem impossible." Alastair squeezed her hand, and together they turned to face the future, the kingdom bright and alive around them. The lessons of struggle and resilience were etched into every smile, every cheer, every hope renewed. The kingdom of Arvindel had survived deceit, embraced justice, and discovered that even in the darkest moments, love and courage could shine brighter than any shadow. And in that moment, Alara and Alastair stood united, not just as rulers, but as beacons of hope, their story a testament to the power of truth, the strength of heart, and the promise of a fair and just world.